Imagine earning a six-figure salary for 5 straight years. You're working tirelessly in this high-stakes life-or-death environment.
Right.
But when you finally look at your bank account, you only have $24,000 to your name.
Wow. That's a jarring
It
realization.
really is. And it gets worse. Because when the sheer exhaustion of that life finally causes you to collapse, literally unconscious on a hospital floor, the very people you've been supporting respond with, well, 79 days of absolute deafening silence.
It's just a staggering paradox.
It is. So welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to explore a deeply personal, really raw narrative from a woman named Nadia.
Yeah, and we're looking at this because her journey isn't just, a conventional story about occupational burnout. It's a profound case study in how our personal boundaries can slowly, almost invisibly, just dissolve over time.
Exactly. We're unpacking the true cost of boundless giving, both the literal financial cost and the immense emotional toll of running on an entirely empty tank. It's a heavy narrative, but an incredibly necessary one for you, the listener, to hear.
Definitely. It's a reality that so many people, particularly those in caregiving roles, might recognize in their own lives, even if the exact numbers look a bit different.
So let's bring you right into the reality of Nadia's life, leading up to a very specific October. She's 38 years old, and she is an ICU nurse.
Which is already an incredibly demanding job.
Right. But by the time this October rolls around, she has not taken a single full day off in 4 months.
4 months without a day off in an intensive care unit.
Yeah. Her financial reality, that $24,000 in savings despite a half-decade of a six-figure income, she called it its own kind of diagnosis.
That's a really powerful way to put it.
She was hemorrhaging energy at work and hemorrhaging resources in her personal life. And the breaking point arrives on a Tuesday night. It's 2:01 in the morning, halfway through this grueling 12-hour shift.
This is that critical moment we see where the physical body simply overrules the mind.
Yes, she goes down. She collapses in the east corridor outside room 14. She wakes up on the floor of the very hospital where she's given 11 years of her life.
Gosh.
But I really struggle to understand this part. Because she's an ICU nurse, right?
Right.
Her entire professional life revolves around identifying the absolute earliest warning signs that a patient is crashing. A subtle drop in oxygen, a slight change in rhythm.
Yeah, hypervigilance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how does someone with that level of elite medical training completely miss the signs of her own total system failure? I mean, is it denial? Or is it a blind spot created by the competence itself?
Well, it's a fascinating psychological blind spot, actually. Caregivers, especially highly trained medical professionals, they often project their own physiological needs onto the patient.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, their awareness is entirely externalized. They are so focused on the person in the bed that they entirely dissociate from the person standing next to the bed themselves.
That makes so much sense.
But the autonomic nervous system, the part of you that controls your heart rate, your breathing it doesn't care about your external competence. It deals in raw resources.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because her reaction to waking up on that floor is not what you might expect.
To understand her reaction, you really have to understand the mechanism of the collapse itself. Think of your brainstem as the master electrical panel of a house.
What?
When psychological stress and physical exhaustion overload the system for too long, the brainstem essentially acts as a circuit breaker.
It just shuts everything down.
Literally cuts the power to your conscious muscles. It forces you to the ground so that your heart and lungs have enough residual energy to just keep the baseline vital functions going.
Wow. It's a forced shutdown to prevent death.
Exactly. High-achieving caretakers often require this literal physical short circuit because their psychological denial is just too strong to bypass any other way.
And that makes the reality of her waking up so much more profound. Because when she opens her eyes on that linoleum floor, she doesn't feel fear. She doesn't feel confusion.
What does she feel?
The very first thing she feels is what she describes as a strange and terrible clarity.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she realizes, and this is a direct quote, she says, "I have been running on empty for so long that I forgot full was an option."
That is just heartbreaking.
It's like living in a house where the foundation is slowly, millimeter by millimeter, sinking into the earth. You don't notice the danger day to day. You just keep adjusting the picture frames on the wall so they look straight.
You just adapt to the tilt.
Exactly. You adapt to the tilt, and then one day, the floor completely caves in, and you realize with terrible clarity that you've been living on a dangerous slant for a decade. The warning lights on the dashboard just became the normal lighting.
What's really fascinating here is how accurately that analogy describes the physiology of chronic depletion.
How so?
Well, when you operate in a state of chronic deficit, your biological and emotional baselines actually shift. That terrible clarity she describes. That is the sudden, violent shattering of that adaptation.
Because she's literally on the floor.
Right. Lying on the floor of a hospital corridor, she could no longer pretend the foundation was stable.
You'd naturally assume that a dramatic collapse like that would be the moment the cavalry arrives.
You would hope so.
The moment the universe shifts, and all those family members and friends you've been pouring your life into finally rush in to hold you up. But the aftermath of this collapse takes us into a deeply isolating emotional landscape.
Yes, this is where it gets really quiet.
Nadia enters what she calls 79 days of silence.
The transition from a physical crisis to an emotional void, this is frequently the most disorienting phase of recovery for a serial caretaker.
Nadia really wants us to understand the texture of that silence. The heartbreaking detail she shares is that it doesn't feel like anger at first. It feels like a quiet, creeping confusion.
You're just waiting for the phone to ring.
Right. You lay there, supposedly recovering, and you just keep inventing explanations for why it isn't ringing. She actually listed the excuses she manufactured for the people who were completely absent.
What did she say?
She told herself, they're busy, or they don't know how serious the collapse was, or they care, they just don't show it the way I need right now.
Oh, man.
And day 10 passes, day 20 passes, day 30, just quiet.
Those excuses, they are a profound psychological defense mechanism.
Really? Like she's protecting herself.
Absolutely. When you have built your entire identity around being the provider, the strong one, acknowledging that those same people are abandoning you in your single moment of weakness is psychologically devastating.
It shatters your worldview.
It threatens to destroy your sense of self-worth. So the mind creates these protective buffers. Believing they are just busy is a subconscious way of delaying the immense grief of realizing the relationships might be entirely transactional.
That grief is held at bay until day 35. The silence is finally broken, but not by her family, not by the friends she had been financially carrying.
Who breaks it?
It's broken by a colleague, a woman named BC, who happens to be the exact person who found Nadia unconscious outside room 14. Yeah, BC texts her simply to ask how she's doing, and Nadia notes a crucial distinction here. BC is texting not because she has to, not because she needs something, but genuinely because she wants to know.
That pure, unmotivated check-in.
Exactly. So they meet for coffee that Saturday. The way Nadia describes this interaction is incredibly gentle. She says BC sat across from her and listened the way you listen when you're not building a response, just receiving.
That is a rare kind of listening.
It is. And then BC looks at her for a long moment and asks one question. Nadia, when is the last time someone took care of you?
A single question that completely dismantles all those protective buffers we just talked about.
Nadia writes that she opened her mouth to answer, and nothing came out, because she genuinely could not remember.
Yeah.
I am just floored by the fact that she literally could not access a memory of being cared for. Why is it that someone so capable defaults to making excuses for others' absence, rather than demanding the support she so clearly deserves?
It comes down to the mechanics of the one-way relationship. Caretakers inadvertently train the people around them to only take.
Oh, so they set the pattern.
Over years, yes, they project an aura of total invulnerability. And eventually, the people in their orbit become conditioned to view the caretaker not as a vulnerable human being, but as an endless resource.
Like a machine that just dispenses help.
Right. And the tragedy is that the caretaker internalizes this role as their primary source of value in the world. If Nadia were to demand support, she would disrupt the very dynamic that makes her feel valuable to those people.
That is so twisted, but it makes so much sense.
It does. And BC's intervention is so incredibly powerful because by simply receiving Nadia's truth without asking for a single thing in return, she modeled a healthy, two-way human connection. She held up a mirror to the imbalance.
And once that mirror is held up, you cannot unsee the reflection.
No, you can't.
The confusion of those 79 days of silence becomes unbearable. So Nadia seeks out an anchor. Because when your emotions are being manipulated by silence, where do you turn? On day 41, at 11:00 p.m., sitting alone at her kitchen table, Nadia turns to math.
Beth.
She opens Microsoft Excel.
The pivot from emotional paralysis to objective data analysis, it is a highly effective coping strategy when dealing with prolonged gaslighting or manipulation.
She writes that she opened Excel because, quote, data doesn't lie. Data doesn't redirect. Data doesn't go quiet when you ask it a difficult question.
It's totally neutral.
Exactly. So she sets up 4 incredibly simple columns: date, recipient, amount, stated reason.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we really have to look at how the brain processes trauma.
Okay.
When you are dealing with one-sided manipulative relationships, your amygdala, which is the brain's emotional threat center, is constantly on overdrive. You feel guilty, you feel anxious, you are terrified of losing the love of your family or friends if you say no.
Just constantly buzzing with that stress.
Yes. In that state, you literally cannot think clearly because the amygdala is suppressing your logical processing. But when you open a spreadsheet and begin inputting hard numbers, you force the brain to switch gears.
You engage the prefrontal cortex.
Exactly, the logical, analytical center of the brain. You bypass the guilt by externalizing the trauma into cold, hard cells on a screen. A spreadsheet is immune to guilt trips.
The reality of those cells is staggering. It's that 4th column, the stated reason, that carries the heaviest emotional weight. She says that column was the one that cost her something to read back.
I can imagine.
Let me read you the exact excuses she documented from the people extracting her money over the years. Just this once. I'll pay you back when I get sorted. Insurance covered nothing. I don't know what else to do. I thought you had my back. And just a few months until things stabilize.
Every single one of those phrases is precision engineered for emotional leverage.
Especially, I thought you had my back.
Oh, that one is particularly insidious. It weaponizes Nadia's own loyalty against her. It frames her setting a boundary as an act of betrayal. It is textbook manipulation designed to keep the amygdala firing and the wallet open.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. It's not just the subtle manipulation. It's the sheer breathtaking scale of the illusion she was living under. She documents that nobody had ever been good for it. Not once in 9 years had a single dollar ever come back.
9 years.
So sitting there at 11 p.m. in the quiet of her kitchen, she highlights the amount column and runs the sum formula.
What was the number?
The result that flashes on the screen is $341,200.
Oh, my goodness.
$341,200.
Oh, my goodness.
Over $250,000.
Gone. Confronting a number of that magnitude. I mean, it is a terrifying liberation.
It's the ultimate zero-interest emergency loan. It's like she treated her own life, her own vital energy, and her future as a boundless Federal Reserve for everyone else's crises.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
She just kept printing money and printing emotional energy for them, absorbing all of their inflation, bailing out their constant emergencies, while her own internal and financial accounts went completely bankrupt.
That is exactly what the data reveals. Because when you look at an individual request, say someone asking for $500 for an unexpected medical bill, it feels cruel to say no. You are focused on the micro-narrative of that single desperate moment.
Right. In the moment, it feels like an emergency.
But the spreadsheet forces the prefrontal cortex to recognize the macro-narrative. The data forces the realization that you are not helping people through a temporary rough patch. You are subsidizing a permanent lifestyle of dependence. And you are doing it at the literal cost of your own survival.
And the personal cost to her own survival and joy was so incredibly high. When Nadia looks at that $341,200 figure, she doesn't just see currency. She sees the ghost of the life she deferred.
The things she gave up.
Exactly. She sees the home she kept promising herself she would buy after things stabilized.
Yeah.
She sees a trip to Iceland. And this detail, it just broke my heart. She had priced out this dream trip to Iceland 4 separate times over the years.
4 times.
4 separate times. And she canceled it 4 separate times because, as she noted in her reflection, something always came up for someone else.
Iceland basically transforms into the ultimate symbol of her deferred existence. Every time she canceled that trip, she was silently telling herself that her joy, her need for rest, her very dreams were secondary to the immediate, endless demands of others.
But this is the moment the narrative shifts. It shifts away from the darkness of the gaslighting and moves toward this profound, serene self-compassion.
How so?
Nadia looks back at the very first transaction on that spreadsheet. It was an $1,100 wire transfer back in 2015. She thinks about her 30-year-old self, newly making 6 figures, and she remembers the intense pride she felt to finally be the one in the family who could help. She explicitly states, and I love this, she says, she hadn't been naive. She had been loving. The love was real. I want to be clear about that.
That specific realization is the turning point toward genuine healing.
Really?
Not anger. No, because the immediate instinct when confronting a betrayal or a financial loss of this magnitude is intense self-flagellation. You want to look at your past self with disgust and scream, "How could you be so foolish? How could you let them drain you?"
Right. You blame yourself.
But Nadia refuses to do that. She recognizes that the impulse that ultimately led to her collapse was actually born from a deeply beautiful place. It was born from genuine love.
So what does this all mean for us? Because navigating that feels like walking a tightrope. How do we, as listeners looking at our own relationships, separate the genuine beauty of our own generosity from the destructiveness of self-sacrifice?
It's a tough balance.
How do you know when the love is real, but the cost is just destroying you?
Well, this raises an important question about how we define the nature of giving. We are often culturally conditioned to believe that true love requires endless, painful sacrifice. That if it doesn't hurt, you aren't giving enough.
Especially for women and caregivers.
Exactly. But sustainable love, whether it's for your family, your friends, or the patients in an intensive care unit, it cannot demand your complete self-erasure. True generosity requires a solid, stable foundation.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Right. If your giving literally leaves you unconscious on a hospital floor with an empty bank account, that is no longer generosity. That is self-immolation.
Wow.
Nadia's profound realization is that you can honor the pure, loving intention of your past generosity without allowing it to dictate your future boundaries. You do not have to hate the people who took from you, and crucially, you do not have to hate the version of yourself who gave to them. You just have to gently, firmly stop the bleeding.
You have to stop the bleeding, and you have to finally book the flight. Because the resolution of Nadia's story, the serene, quiet conclusion to all of this chaotic trauma, is her deciding to finally, unapologetically, choose herself.
She books the trip.
The ultimate uncanceling of that trip to Iceland becomes her profound act of self-care. It's her stepping off the sinking foundation and claiming finally that her full is an option.
Reclaiming Iceland is reclaiming her autonomy. It is the physical manifestation of closing the Excel spreadsheet of other people's crises and opening a map to her own life.
It's a beautiful place to land. Let's gently bring this all together. We've followed Nadia from that terrifying physical breaking point, collapsing in the East Corridor outside room 14, a victim of her own boundless capability and a physiological system that finally said, no more.
Yeah.
We navigated the haunting weight of those 79 days of isolating silence, understanding how the absence of expected rescue forces had devastating internal reckoning.
And then the spreadsheet.
Right. We sat beside her at the kitchen table as she bypassed her emotional exhaustion, using Excel to confront a $341,200 ghost. And finally, we witnessed the most important step, extending grace to her younger self, forgiving the past, and prioritizing her own recovery by booking the flight to Iceland.
It is a journey from unconscious endurance to conscious protective boundary setting, and it serves as a stark, necessary reminder that the math of our physical energy and our emotional resources will always eventually balance itself.
One way or another.
Exactly. The only question is whether we choose to balance it willingly or wait until our bodies force the equation upon us.
Which brings me right back to you listening to this deep dive right now. As you reflect on Nadia's quiet, powerful journey, I want you to look at the ledger of your own life.
What's on your spreadsheet?
Exactly.
Yep.
What is your version of the home you haven't bought? What is your Iceland? What dream, what rest, what simple joy have you priced out and canceled over and over again because someone else always seemed to need your resources more than you did?
We all have an Iceland we've been delaying. The challenge is recognizing when the delay has become a permanent state of being.
Exactly. So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over long after this audio ends. We so often view the absence of others as a reflection of our own value. When the phone doesn't ring, we think we aren't worth the call.
But maybe that's not it.
What if the silence of others during your hardest moments isn't a reflection of your lack of worth at all? What if that silence is actually a gift? The exact, uninterrupted quiet you need to finally hear your own voice.
That's a powerful thought.
Thank you so much for taking the time to share this space and this incredible story with us today. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And maybe, just maybe, look up some flights to Iceland.